Hello, everybody. I hope y'all are doing well in our pandemic style living currently. So, we're going to go into our second lecture of the course, and it covers the introduction chapter to the textbook. Now, it's really important to go over this information from the introduction chapter because it goes over a couple terms that might be useful for later on, especially because the first couple chapters are a little bit dense and harder to understand. So, I feel like it was necessary to have a quick lecture on the introduction chapter just so that we can cover our bases and have a good understanding before we move into chapter 1. So, with that being said, we're going to start our lecture on the Introduction to Criminal Justice Administration. And this is our first chapter. And as a reminder, the slides are all online as well for you to access, so you don't have to worry about writing down as fast as I speak. So, our first topic we're going to need to cover is why study organizational theory in criminal justice system. So, it's not solely enough to understand the organizational structure and functions of the criminal justice system. If you want to lead or study it further or be a part of the criminal justice system as an employee, you must understand that the criminal justice system doesn't occur in a vacuum, meaning that there are a lot of outside factors and influences that influence the criminal justice system itself, as well as the criminal justice system influences these other factors. And this is a term that the book calls reflexivity. So that just means that the factors and the criminal justice system don't occur in a vacuum. Everything is influenced by everything else. So we need to understand organizational theory so that we can understand what controls what and who controls what. We understand what and who controls the power within the system. So moving on from why study organizational theory in criminal justice, we're going to move into defining what organizations mean for the rest of the course. So when I say organizations, I'm going to use the definition in the book as the definition for organizations because there's a lot of them. So we're going to focus on the book's definition. And the book's definition was that social structures created by individuals to support the collaborative pursuit of a specified goal. Now, this means that specialized people and groups of people working together in order to obtain a certain goal, like a desired outcome. Everybody's working to go. For a criminal justice system, this would be if the goal is to reduce crime. Everybody's going to be working towards that goal of reduced crime. So that organization's main focus, reduce crime. So our definition largely rests on the idea of social order, which if you didn't already know, social order just means that it's a desirable state of living. Everybody wants order and norm when in society. So, in the criminal justice system, organizations are granted authority to enforce organizationally developed rules through enforcing criminal law. So they are given powers by, obviously, the government to enforce these rules. Now we're going to take that definition one step further and look at the three organizational levels within an organization. Now we're going to cover these in more detail later on, but we're going to focus on just knowing that there are three. So the three ones are technological, managerial, and institutional/administrative. Right now we're going to focus mainly on the institutional level, so that third grouping. Now, the institutional level. What is the institutional level? The institutional level is where the administrators make decisions and influence the entire organization. So these decisions could include agency missions, goals, operating procedures, visions, general things that influence the entire organization. So like changing how they get paid every week, all that kind of stuff, all falls under institutional level decisions. So then we're going to talk about decision making. Now, as it relates to criminal justice theory, criminal justice is the delivery of justice occurred by decision making. So that just means that delivery of justice, which is what the CJ system does, occurs through decision making. So each agency within the criminal justice system is responsible for making decisions and a process that leads to justice. So each part of the criminal justice system makes a decision before it moves on to the next stage. So let's do an example. Our example is going to be a judge. So a judge can make a decision either to, when he sentences somebody, sentences an offender, does he send the offender to jail, or does he put him or her on probation? He can go either way. Now that is a decision which ultimately it carries justice. If he decides on probation, somebody else picks up the case, moves on, and now he has a probation officer. If he sends it to prison, it's now in the corrections part of the criminal justice system. So every decision relies on that. So decision making doesn't only occur in formal organizations, it also happens in non-formal organizations. Now, for now, we're going to cover and say that the difference between formal and non-formal organizations is that formal organizations are created by statutes. So like the law, judicial, constitution created these organizations. For non-formal organizations, we're going to think of it as a nonprofit for now. Nonprofit, which means it's like one of the, like a church, like organizations like charity, all of those types of organizations would be a non-formal organization. So continuing on with this idea that delivery of justice occurs by decision making, we're going to take it a little bit further. So like I said before, decision making occurs at various points in the criminal justice system based on information that they are provided. In our example from earlier with the judge receives information in the form of facts, evidence. More specifically, like if the judge was told, hey, this is a first-time offender, they're more likely to suggest parole versus probation, parole or probation, or other sanctioning, instead of sending him directly to prison because he's only offended once or twice. So the information definitely depends, causes, influences, all of that onto their decision making, and that is an example. More recently, there's been a shift towards scientific-based information for developing evidence-based justice intervention strategies. So that means is that people want proof that it works through scholarly research, through journal articles, something. Like anybody out there doing research can say this is scientifically based evidence, that kind of information. And this is mainly because of Martinson, who in the 1970s, you may have known, was famous for the Nothing Works declarations. And the Nothing Works declaration was simply saying that no intervention will ever work to rehabilitate offenders. Now, this is largely problematic, as we already know, and because of his statement saying nothing works, we have to prove it otherwise through scientific-based information. So we're not funding projects that don't work or ineffective and that kind of stuff. And continuing on, we're going to go over the decision-making at the institutional level. Now, as we said before, there are three main levels. And at the institutional or administrative level, decision-making occurs a little bit differently. Decision-making at this institutional level occurs because of two main variables. The first one is preferences about possible outcomes, and the second is beliefs about cause and effect relationships. Further, decision-making and the preferences about possible outcomes are usually aligned with expressed missions and goals of the organization. So this is what they would prefer the outcome to be. So an example would be for the criminal justice system. The express mission or goal is to increase public safety and reduce crime. So that is their possible outcome. But how are they going to do this? That is taken into account in the second variable, which is the cause and effect relationship. Now these are going to vary widely between type of organization, whether it's the government, all sorts of different variables. So it's really hard to quantify that. But basically, there's a cause. If you decide one way or the other, there's a cause, and there's going to be an effect right after that. So, and to continue on our example earlier, if the two main goals are to increase public safety and reduce crime, how are we going to do this? Are we going to reduce crime by locking more people up, or are we going to reduce crime by rehabilitating them? So the cause, and this would be either choosing to lock them up or to rehabilitate, and that's your decision. And the effect would be either reducing crime or increasing crime through recidivation. Or you could have a different effect of if you rehabilitate them, then they won't commit a crime, which thus reduces your crime rate. So, based on those two variables, there are several decision-making strategies that can occur. And these are based on the ideas of the two variables previously. So your preferences about possible outcomes and your beliefs about cause and effect relationships. So those are your two variables to keep in mind as we go through these three strategies. So organizations can vary in their strategies, but generally they're going to fall into three broad categories. You have your computational strategy, your inspirational strategy, and your compromise strategy. So we're going to start with the computational strategy. The computational strategy is a decision strategy that is made when there's complete data on both outcome preferences and your cause and effect relationship. So you have to have complete and crystal clear data knowing this cause is going to cause this effect. Same with your outcome preference. And this is very, very rare. Rarely do you know exactly how it's going to occur, when it's going to occur. That would be like predicting the future. So that's pretty rare. Computational strategies are pretty rare. So we're going to go into inspirational strategies, which happens more commonly. These are used when they're the situation of incomplete data on either the outcome preference or the cause and effect relationship of the decision. So there could be an incomplete data, you don't know what's going to happen, all of that. That's an inspirational strategy. And that is definitely more common because more than likely you're not going to have complete data ever. So it's going to be an inspirational strategy. Now, your compromise strategy occurs when there's a conflict of opposing preferences. So when two things butt up against each other, you got to make a compromise. That is essentially that third strategy. So anything that you have to make a compromise between two opposing arguments. So make a decision through that. So the last thing we're going to cover and define is a system. And we're going to use the book's definition of what a system is and then apply it to the criminal justice system before I let y'all go. So, what is a system? A system is a defined set of connected elements or parts that make up a more complete whole. So keep that in mind, and now we're going to apply that to the criminal justice system. Now, we said that a system connects elements or parts to make a more complete whole. What kind of elements are in the criminal justice system? Criminal justice system, as you probably are already aware of through numerous classes, is made of police, courts, corrections, and then connections between these elements. This entire setup is in fact the criminal justice system, which is in fact a system. So, and all the connections in between all make up your system in criminal justice system. So that's kind of how it applies. All right, so that was our rather short lecture on the introductory chapter of our text. Now the next lecture is probably going to be a bit longer due to the fact that it's the first chapter and it's pretty dense. So look forward to having y'all back and speaking on that chapter very soon. Hope y'all stay safe, enjoy it, and try not to be too stressed out. I'll talk to y'all later. Have a great day.